Hello and welcome back to Dave Make the Shiny Side Out on revolution.radio or freedomslips.com, wherever you're coming from. We are going to talk about the Great Reset today. We're going to talk about who runs the world, because those two are obviously intimately connected. There's one thing I wanted to share with you before we talk about that. We found a new species of whale last week. We found a new gland in our noses the other week, and new whales this week. But, there's nothing new under the sun, Dave.
There's nothing new to discover, for sure.
It's just nuts.
I'm done.
Right?
I'm closed my textbook.
I know. I've learned all I can. My head is full. I'm going home. No, I'm not. The Great Reset, just a bit of background here. Everybody's talking about it. It is something that was proposed by Karl Schwab, one of the co-founders of the World Economic Forum. You never heard of that? Well, it's the people that meet at Davos a whole bunch of times, or actually once a year, really. Davos in Switzerland. All the global elite get together, and I'm using the word advisedly. These are all the big CEOs, etc., corporates, politicians, and they determine the course of the world. Oh, well, so they think they do. No press allowed. That's a shock. So Karl Schwab then says, we need to have a reset, a great reset, because this COVID-19 crisis here has given us the perfect opportunity to make the world better, Dave, to make it better, to make it nicer, and, sunshine and lollipops and all those wonderful things. Really.
It makes me feel great inside, Mickey.
Doesn't it? Right?
Yeah.
And it's not new. It's not new thinking, per se. And we have seen some of it creeping through. And Dave, you talked about the living wage.
That's
for
right.
For instance, why don't you just very quickly explain what that means to our listeners?
Right. So the living wage is simply you receive a wage for being alive. Simply.
Yep.
The only way that a government could afford to pay everybody in the entirety of their sovereignty would be creation of money from thin air in a bank account or a debit card. You just get money on a debit card. And what that would do to what you would imagine, Mackie, as a result, that would do to inflation, well, that's yet to be seen. The other thing is the only way they could do it by increasing your asset base. And I'll let you talk about that more.
Sure. So that's ultimately it. Dave is 100% correct. And the funny thing is, if you read Robert Sheckley, fantastic science fiction writer of the 50s and 60s, and he wrote more stuff later on, but 50s and 60s was really his golden time. He talked about that a lot in his sort of dystopian description of the world to come. And one story specifically I remember was about a person, and all they did was vote. So they didn't work. And they got a stipend from the state. They would just get paid, by the government, enough to live. And if you wanted to do more, then you could apply yourself, get better jobs, and work harder. But you got enough from the government to live well too. And then sponsors would sponsor entertainments, drugs, food, other events, and those sponsors usually were people running for political office. And then you would decide who to vote for, whoever gave you the most stuff. It's very similar to what the Romans used to do, right? Because what the Romans used to do, and that's why Gaius Julius went to Gaul to conquer, was to get gold to give to people in Rome to vote him into political office. That's really what he did.
Oh, gifting gold, there's no better thing, is there?
Yeah, he would throw it away in the streets and have games. He also would finance the games in the Colosseum, etc., and the Hippodrome, races, etc. So if you ever wonder why the Roman Empire expanded so much, because they were looking for gold to give to the people in Rome to vote for them. That's really what the driving force was, plus slaves as well, right? Slaves and gold. But ultimately, though, that's exactly what it is. So eventually, what the elite envisions is a population much reduced, I believe, but essentially a population that is pretty much taken care of, the government pays for them, pays them a stipend. And all they do is vote or whatever, consume, this and that. You still have a civilization that has to run, I guess. You still need people for that. But ultimately, they would be completely disenfranchised. Not in the true sense of the word, only in the sense of the word that the fastest way, Dave, to destroy someone's culture and character and purpose, is maybe the best word, is by giving them everything for free. We've seen it many times with the First Nations peoples in North America, in South America, in Australia certainly. where the welfare system was actually designed to destroy the culture by robbing these people of their purpose. Think about that for a second. Robbing them of their purpose. I mean, I know about you guys out there in the world, but I feel best when I've done the hard days of physical labor. I feel really great. I've accomplished something, right? I mean, I like my job and I accomplish things there as well, but it's nothing compared to the physical labor. And all of us crave a purpose. All of us crave to have meaning in our lives, right? And in hard work, actually, it does. It's very satisfying. It does that for you. Now, what they want to do now, in my opinion, Dave, is they want to take that away. They want to take it away and turn us essentially really just into I don't know, drones or voters, maybe just door bludgeoning voters, if you will. You know, that's really where they see us. Maybe doing some menial service jobs or being in retail. Who knows? But certainly not. The elite doesn't want the great unwashed to participate in governing this place. Right? They want the democracy is something they think is a nice experiment. Didn't really work out. Let's move on to something else. Now, what do they say though? What does the World Economic Forum say about the Great Reset? And this is what they say. I've taken this straight from their website because I like that's where I like to start. I like to start right at the beginning and say, see what they say. So
what do they say?
What do they say? So what they say is this. So this is the context, straight from the website. The COVID-19 crisis and the political, economic, and social disruption it has caused is fundamentally changing the traditional context for decision-making. That's interesting. The inconsistencies, inadequacies, and contradictions of multiple systems, from health and financial to energy and education, are more exposed than ever amidst the global context of concern for lives, livelihoods, and the planet. Leaders find themselves at historic crossroads, managing short-term pressures against medium and long-term uncertainties. So, what they're saying is the way we make decisions is fundamentally changing. That's really what the context is. Nothing else, just decision-making. Now, what's the opportunity now? As we enter a unique window of opportunity to shape the recovery, this initiative will offer insights to help inform all those determining the future state of global relations, the direction of national economies, the priorities of societies, the nature of business models, and the management of the global commons. Now, those people, of course, are all the Davos attendees, right? That's where Klaus Schwab sits. Drawing from the vision and vast expertise of the leaders engaged across the forum's communities, the Great Reset Initiative has a set of dimensions to build a new social contract that honors the dignity of every human being. But you know what, Dave? I don't think they have quite defined what that human being is. What does the agenda have, though? Tell us about the three main components of the Great Reset agenda.
All right, the Great Reset agenda would have three main components. The first would steer the market towards fairer outcomes. To this end, governments should improve their coordination, for example, in tax, regulatory, and fiscal policy, upgrade trade arrangements, and create the conditions for a stakeholder economy. At a time of diminishing tax bases, we're all getting poorer, all the country getting poorer, and soaring public debt, governments have a powerful incentive to pursue such action. Moreover, governments should implement long overdue reforms that promote more equitable outcomes. Depending on the country, these may include changes to wealth taxes, the withdrawal of fossil fuel subsidies, and new rules governing intellectual property, trade, and competition. The second component of a Great Reset agenda would ensure that investments advance shared goals, such as equality and sustainability. Here, the large-scale spending programs that many governments are implementing represent a major opportunity for progress. The European Commission, for one, has unveiled plans for a €750 billion or 826 billion recovery fund. The US, China, and Japan also have ambitious economic stimulus plans. Rather than using these funds as well as investments from private entities and pension funds to fill cracks in the old system. We should use them to create a new one that is more resilient, equitable and sustainable in the long run. This means, for example, building green urban infrastructure and creating incentives for industries to improve their track record on environmental, social, and governance ESG metrics. The third and final priority of a great reset agenda is to harness the innovations of the fourth industrial revolution to support the public good, especially by addressing health and social challenges. During the COVID-19 crisis, companies, universities, and others have joined forces to develop diagnostic, therapeutics, and possible vaccines, establish testing centres, create mechanisms for tracing infections, and deliver telemedicine. I'm making that symbol to making in all the listeners, the one that you see all the other people in, making, where you make your hands into a diamond. Imagine what could be possible if similar concerted efforts were made in every sector.
And look, it sounds pretty good. Until you start.
My wallet's in the car.
Right. Ooh, limited stock. Until you start unpacking it. Once you start unpacking it, it actually doesn't make any sense. And we'll get to the analyses in a second. I do need to explain a term here, and some of our listeners might not be familiar with this. Stakeholder. What's a stakeholder economy? Now, we don't know what the shareholder economy is. We get that. But what's the stakeholder economy? So the way they reframe the economic environment, or want to reframe it, is that economies should service all stakeholders, right? That's employees and customers, it's suppliers, it's communities in which they operate, and the environment, along with the shareholders. And the intention here is to promote an economy that serves all. And in the case of America, all Americans, all Australians, whatever it might be, right? But it's an all-inclusive mandate. That's where corporate ethics come in, good corporate governance, et cetera, and social responsibility, right? So a stakeholder economy puts a lot of weight, allegedly, on social responsibility, social activities, social programs, et cetera. So that's a stakeholder economy. So rather than just serving the needs of the shareholders, right, companies and economies need to service the needs of the stakeholders. That's everybody essentially that lives in that country, or more broadly, anyone who's living on this planet. That's what stakeholder economy means. Now, do we really think that the large corporations think, let's do that? I will forego my massive what's it called? Super profits. Was it super profits or some? Is it like a crazy term?
Yeah.
In Australia, we don't have profits. We have super profits.
that was to do with the mining industry specifically.
Absolutely.
Just tax them because they have super profits.
Yeah. Except, of course, no one does that. Now,
what do they do? What do they do to avoid those? They dug it out of the ground and just stored it rather than sell it. Yep.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. We didn't sell anything. We were just sitting on it. In fact, we were claiming a loss this year. That's what you do.
That's gold.
It is gold, though, right?
Yeah.
Just on that.
Or it's precious metals, or it's coal.
It's copper. The Rio Tinto was ordered by the courts to rebuild the cave they destroyed. Did you see that?
Yeah.
I don't know how that would work.
Let's rebuild a cave.
No, but how do you rebuild a 40,000-year-old Aboriginal sacred site? I want to understand. I'm going to follow that. I want to know what that looks like. And by the way, what happened to Glenn Maxwell? But it
was $530 million that they're going to have to be forced to pay the Aboriginal elders of the area. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, but honestly, I think
the elders are going to drive Ferraris.
Yeah, well, and so they should. Good luck to them, right? But I think the cave is probably more important. Because I do believe that the Aboriginals are a little more spiritually connected to the land than us latecomers. Now we've now established, so we've gathered together here a number of articles that deal very specifically with the Great Reset and in some detail, right? The analyses come from across the spectrum of the political landscape, and some of the writers you might know. The first one, I actually enjoy her work. She worked for The Guardian quite a bit. Her name is Naomi Klein. The article was written December 9, 2020. So that's just a few days ago. And it's called The Great Reset Conspiracy Smoothie. A viral conspiracy theory blends together legitimate critiques with truly dangerous anti-vaccination fantasies and outright coronavirus denialism. So that's the byline here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But some of the analyses in there, and I ask you to bear with me, it's very important for us to internalize and understand. Okay? Now, she's not a conspiracy theorist or factist at all, and none of the articles, it's not true. Most of the articles that we're going to look at here are not. But there's gold in here, and I'll point it out when we get to it. Okay, let's start with the article. Back in June, the World Economic Forum, best known for its annual Davos Summit, kicked off. A lunch for organizational relevance at a time when it was already clear that for the foreseeable future, packing thousands of people injected, cheek by lifted jowl, into a Swiss ski resort to talk about harnessing the power of markets to end rural poverty was a non-starter. So she's from the left of the political spectrum, just in case you're wondering. The effort was called The Great Reset. And through articles, videos, webinars, podcasts, and the book by World Economic founder Klaus Schwab, it provided a coronavirus-themed rebranding of all the things Davos does anyway. Now hastily repackaged as a blueprint for reviving the global economy post-pandemic by seeking a better form of capitalism. The Great Reset was a place to hawk for-profit techno-fixes to complex social problems. To hear heads of transnational oil giants opine about the urgent need to tackle climate change. Again, transnational oil giants, okay? They want to tackle climate change. So listen to politicians say the things they say during crises. That this is a tragedy, but also an opportunity. It's a crisis-opportunity. That they are committed to building back better and ushering in a fairer, greener, healthier planet. Prince Charles, David Attenborough, and the head of the International Monetary Fund all figured prominently. In short, the Great Reset encompasses some good stuff that won't happen and some bad stuff that certainly will. And frankly, nothing out of the ordinary in our era of green billionaires readying rockets for Mars. Indeed, anyone with even a cursory knowledge of Davos speak and the number of times it has attempted to rebrand capitalism as a slightly buggy poverty alleviation and ecological restoration program will recognize the vintage champagne in this online carafe. This history is explored in an excellent new book and film by the law professor Joel Bakan, The New Corporation, How Good Corporations Are Bad for Democracy. Though its highly influential global competitiveness report, the WEF has played a leading role in the transnational campaign to liberate capital from all encumbrances, like robust regulation, protections for local industries, progressive taxation, and, heaven forbid, nationalizations. Long ago, however, Schwab realized that if Davos didn't add some do-gooding to its well-doing, the pitchforks, that had started amassing at the foot of the mountain would eventually storm the gates, as they came close to doing during the 2001 summit, if you cast your mind back. And so the giddy sessions on new markets in Malaysia and new startups in California were complemented with somber ones on melting ice caps, United Nations development goals, impact investing, stakeholder capitalism, which we just explained, and corporate global citizenship. In 2003, Schwab introduced the tradition of each January summit having a big theme, starting with the appropriately chastened building trust. The new Davos tone, though, was truly set in 2005, when actor Sharon Stone, upon hearing Tanzania's president speak of his nation's need for mosquito nets to battle malaria, leapt to her feet and turned the session into an impromptu charity auction to purchase the nets. She raised $1 million in 5 minutes, and a new Davos era was on its way. The Great Reset is merely the latest edition of this gilded tradition, barely distinguishable from earlier Davos big ideas, from shaping the post-crisis world in 2009 to rethink, redesign, rebuild in 2010, and the Great Transformation in 2012. And who can forget creating a shared future in a fractured world in 2018? And this is, listen carefully now, this is important. If Davos wasn't seeking a better form of capitalism to solve the spiraling crises Davos itself systematically deepened, it wouldn't be Davos. Okay, now it's abridged. The article that is, and whenever you see the ... Dave, that's when I've abridged it. So why don't you take us through some of the next points here? This is really interesting.
What Schwab and the WEF are doing with the Great Reset is both subtle and insidious. Schwab is, of course, absolutely right when he says that the pandemic has revealed many deadly structural failures of capitalism as usual, as does the accelerating climate crisis and the hoovering of the planet's wealth up towards the Davos class, even in the midst of a global pandemic. But like the WEF's earlier big themes, the Great Reset is not a serious effort to actually solve the crisis it describes. On the contrary, it is an attempt to create a plausible impression that the huge winners in the system are on the verge of voluntarily setting greed aside to get serious about solving the raging crises that are radically disabling our world. Why? Because if our corporate overlords can create this impression, it is less likely that governments will listen to the rising chorus of voices calling on them to do what is required to actually combat spiraling poverty, joblessness, climate breakdown, and informational degeneration. Regulate the companies that have created these crises and tax them, break them up, and, in some cases, put them under public control. And if you're following social media, you'll understand who that is, and I think it's social media. So no, the Great Reset is not just another name for the Green New Deal, as many right-winger and digital chalkboard and an unhealthy AOC obsession is absurdly claiming. It is, first and foremost, about blocking a real Great New Deal, which most assuredly would not have the support of BP, MasterCard, and the Prince of Wales and all of the other Great Reset partners. And yet, in recent weeks, a slew of right-wing commentators on Fox News, as well as Brazil's Minister of Foreign Affairs and prominent opposition politicians in Australia and Canada, have claimed to be confused about this and are suddenly giving oxygen to what was, until recently, a marginal conspiracy. Laura Ingraham, Tucker Carlson, and Ben Shapiro have all been terrifying their huge audiences with claims that green socialism is about to be forced down their throats via Schwab's Great Reset, which, they explain, is the very same thing as President-elect Joe Biden's Build Back Better plan, which is itself a thin cover for Rep. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez' Green New Deal. Do these people honestly think that Schwab is in cahoots with AOC and using the pandemic to put BP out of business? With the full cooperation of BP, for that matter. Of course not, but President Donald Trump is on his way out and the Green New Deal is popular, precisely because it is as far away from Davos as it could be, grounded in polluter pays ethos and is programs like a jobs guarantee and in universal health care that enjoy broad working class support. For right-wing politicians and the oil companies that back them, the more climate action can be conflated with an organization known for its traffic jams of private jets and its Bond villain founder, the easier it will be to resist any climate plan at all. That's why the earliest alarmism about the Great Reset came from the Heartland Institute, ground zero of the climate change denial machine. This messaging is gaining traction not because people are suckers, but because they are mad. And they have every right to be. Lockdown policies that have demanded months of individual sacrifice for the collective good without providing the most basic collective protections to keep families from slipping into starvation and homelessness, or to keep small businesses afloat. Meanwhile, trillions have been spent to backstop markets and bail out multinationals, and pandemic profiteering is rampant. Is it any wonder that so many find it entirely plausible that the same elites who expect to swallow all the coronavirus-related sacrifices while they party in the Hamptons on private islands would be also willing to exaggerate the risks of this disease to get them to accept more bitter green medicine for the common good? As that first Davos theme made clear, the trust between the people and the mountaintop has been broken, and it most certainly has not been rebuilt. Mackie. Okay.
For a glimpse of how all of this fits together, take a look at what is going on in Alberta, Canada, under its truly reprehensible premier, one Jason Kenney. Kenney came to power pledging to serve as a shameless valet for the Alberta oil patch, specifically its extra-fast planet-cooking tar sands. He promised to ram through all pipelines, no matter the opposition, and create a war room to surveil all opponents. Back in March, in the early days of the pandemic, he had just laid off 20,000 education workers, supposedly to cover pandemic costs, even as he lavished $7 billion in public subsidies on the Keystone XL pipeline, despite the lockdowns having created a massive glut in the crude oil. He followed up in the fall by laying off another 11,000 healthcare workers, a clear effort to use the COVID-19 crisis to open the door to partial US-style healthcare privatization. It has surprised no one that Kenney has also presided over a US-style coronavirus explosion, with the province's positivity rate recently topping 10%, higher than the average south of the border. Now Kenney, a self-proclaimed big government-bashing libertarian, has been reduced to begging Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for funds to build field hospitals. Is it any wonder he has been looking to change the subject? Last week, Kenney did exactly that, selecting a question about the Great Reset during a Facebook live stream. The Premier feigned horror at the idea that Klaus Schwab could possibly see COVID-19 as an opportunity to advance policy goals, describing the plan as a grab bag of left-wing ideas for less freedom and more government, and failed socialist policy ideas. Warming up to his subject, he declared, "I'm not going to be taking any policy direction from Klaus Schwab and his ilk. Heck no. We're not going to exploit or take advantage of a crisis to advance a political agenda." You know what they say, right? Never waste a good crisis. Mm-hmm. It's very distasteful and regrettable that influential people would explicitly seek to take advantage of a crisis like this to advance their own political vision and values. The online right rejoiced. Jason Kenney shows real leadership, rejecting Klaus Schwab's New World Order, declared one outlet, amongst many others. Sadly, Kenney's aversion to crisis opportunism comes late for the thousands of newly unemployed education and hospital workers in his province, or for the hundreds of patients who will soon be getting treatment in its field hospitals. And though Kenney was quick to say that the Great Reset was not a conspiracy theory and that the coronavirus is real, his statements were immediately seized upon by the growing numbers of people who are seriously convinced that COVID-19 is a hoax cooked up by the Davos globalists to eliminate their private property, poison their brains with 5G, and take away their rights to go to the gym. Right? Now, none of this is to say that Schwab's reset push is benign and unworthy of scrutiny. All kinds of dangerous ideas are lurking under its wide brim, from a reckless push toward more automation in the midst of a joblessness crisis to the steady move to normalize mass surveillance and biometric tracking tools, to the very real, though not new, problem of Bill Gates' singular power over global health policy. And this is a paragraph I really want you to really take in. The irony, though, is that the fact Vitamix currently whirring around the Great Reset actually makes it harder to hold the Davos set accountable for any of this, since legitimate critiques have now been blended together with truly dangerous anti-vaccination fantasies and outright coronavirus denialism. Is it all a plan? Another kind of elaborate conspiracy? Nothing so elegant. As Steve Bannon kindly told us, the informational strategy of the Trump era has always been to flood the zone with poo. 4 years later, we can see what this looks like in practice. It looks like far-left and far-right conspiracists sitting down over a tray of information, poo sandwiches, to talk about how the Great Reset is Gates' plan to use DNA from our COVID-19 tests to turn the United States into Venezuela. It makes no sense, and that's just fine by the likes of Bannon and Kenny as well. Because if you want to keep waging war on the Earth's life-supporting ecology, a great way to do it is to deliberately pollute its democracy-supporting information ecology. In fact, the pollution is the point. Now, you probably understand why I wanted to share with you Naomi's article here. She raises some fantastic points. And like I said, she's not a conspiracy theorist, and that's fine, or conspiracy factors, but she does see there is a web that is being spun, and she does point out the dangers quite eloquently, I thought, as well. And there's some more interesting facts as we go through the next article, which was written by another woman, Parnell Palm McGuinness. Dave, if you want to start on that.
Absolutely. So the Great Reset or grating global conspiracy theory, either way, don't dismiss genuine anxiety. So Parnell wrote this November 21, 2020, so it's about a month, not a month old. I have a clear-eyed view of the world. You have a bias, and they have a conspiracy theory. This is the way a declension usually seems to work. Our anxieties are real, and the anxieties of others increasingly bizarre. Earlier this month, Senator Pauline Hanson, I actually brought this story up, Mekki, on our show. Pauline Hanson moved a motion to reject the World Economic Forum's Great Reset. She lost 37-2, by the way. The senator asked Parliament to note that adopting the policies would devastate the economic well-being and individual freedoms of Australians, and that the Australian government should boycott all World Economic Forum events in protest over the Great Reset agenda. The motion referred to a theory that the global elite are planning to impose a new world order using the COVID-19 pandemic as a cover. Hanson's Facebook post about the notice of motion was reshared 9,000 times. A later Facebook post linking to a Sky editorial about the Great Reset was shared 10,000 times. The motion was voted down 37-2, as I just said earlier. Green Senator Janet Rice ridiculed it, saying it reflected the sad, insular and fear-filled agenda of One Nation. That was the party she belonged to. Senator Rice endorsed the Great Reset as a very modest World Economic Forum initiative aiming for cooperation among global stakeholders. What a difference a couple of decades makes. Once the World Economic Forum represented everything the Greens opposed. The World Economic Forum is a global think tank best known for hosting an annual meeting of political and business leaders at the Swiss alpine town of Davos. That's where it gets its name. The main stage hosts keynote speeches by presidents, blue-chip CEOs, and company presidents, and laterally, Hollywood celebrities. But the real value lies in smaller sideline meetings. They're called breakouts. as well as the opportunity to network informally with the people whose money and influence power the global economy. In 2000, former Greens leader Bob Brown's blockaded a WEF meeting in Melbourne. In 2001, activist Naomi Klein delighted in the outrage of the WEF high priests of competition as their civic society participants were poached by the World Social Forum, colloquially anti-Davos, in Porto Alegre, Brazil. Sure, I'm mispronouncing it. On precisely the same days as the Davos summit. The slogan of anti-Davos 2001 was "Another world is possible." Another world is possible. Since the Davos has performed a classic capitalist maneuver. Faced with serious competition, it absorbed the competitor to create an oligopoly, which has little to fear from smaller market alternatives. Davos now positions itself as a forum in which the powerful and famous create a better world. It just sounds so good. I want to. Can I buy some?
I want to buy 2 Davos, please.
In May this year, shortly after the coronavirus pandemic had shut down many economies, Prince Charles and Professor Klaus Schwab, the executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, announced plans to hold a meeting of world leaders to discuss the global economy could be reset in order to build back better. Since that meeting, it was in July, many world leaders have alluded to a great reset in their public addresses. They may be echoing the WEF. It's equally possible they are just like the sound of the phrase Great Reset. In any other year, these anodyne words might have been dismissed as the usual rhetoric of political and business leaders who speak much and do little. In the upheaval of the pandemic, in which our lives have been quickly and meaningfully changed by decisions from above, they have fueled the conspiracy theory that Pauline Hanson brought to Parliament. According to the theory, the great and powerful are planning to use the upheaval caused by the pandemic to impose a new world order, trampling the concerns of the powerless. Now, even the kookiest conspiracy theory is based on an anxiety that may be founded in truth. The Great Reset conspiracy theory is undeniably founded in truth. The plan to reform the way we do things is real. It's true that leaders around the world are enthusiastically repeating the notion, and it's true that that such reforms would constitute a significant intervention in the lives of citizens to realize the vision of a group that can, without hyperbole, thank you, best be termed as the global elite. The Great Reset imagines a radically different economic system in the words and word order of the global management consultants McKinsey. The agenda would be climate change, sustainability, social justice, and the pandemic. I'll end at the end of this bold. A frequently cited phrase from a World Economic Forum 2030 prediction is that you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. It's like they live, Mickey, to be honest. To some, this means communalism. Others hear communism. Whether you see this as the shining vision or a dystopian dispossession depends largely on your social and ideological vantage point. That means the point at which you stand viewing this. Meki, it's so difficult when this is just Meki and I talking now. This is so difficult for me to comprehend how this is going to be paid for, how the living wage would occur. And if you're going to hand over all of your assets, you give them an asset base, which I alluded to in the beginning of the halfway through last show, in order for them to have the money to pay you, which is basically signing away your ownership of everything to live.
Mm-hmm. The problem is this, Dave, and we discussed this, right? Our generation, we're in our 50s. Maybe I should say this here.
It's okay. I'm 50X, right?
Yeah, same. Look, but I grew up with the ethos of if you work hard, you'll get somewhere, right? And there was no prize for coming fourth. just there was no when I grew up, there was no participation award. If you didn't come first, second, or third, you lost. In fact, if you didn't come first, you lost. But that's how I was brought up. Whereas now, though, and this is really about a mind shift in the population, and I'm talking about only, of course, the Western nations, where this is, I guess, possible because of the very affluence that we have. We've bred a generation, maybe even generations of young people that don't have that same work ethic and the same ethos, and they don't want to be part of this economic rat race. They don't want to be part of this machine as they perceive it, which is fair enough. I get it, right? I get it. Don't get me wrong. But they are also less materialistic in many ways than we are, which it's not a bad thing either. But if someone came to you and I, Dave, and then tried to take away the things that we worked all our lives to put together to get, as it were, right, to guarantee a certain level of safety for ourselves and our families, we would not just take it. We would, out of my cold dead hands type thing,
Yeah, that's right.
Whereas the new millennial generation and generations following it may offer a lot less resistance.
Maybe embrace it entirely.
Right? Yeah, because this is good. This is what we need. We should focus on the on the climate. See, this is how they do it. The Great Reset, and this is important what you just read. The Great Reset and the world order is important, right? In the words of McKinsey, the agenda will be climate change, number 1, sustainability 2, social justice, and then the pandemic. So climate change, sustainability, social justice. So if you put these in the pandemic, which is good, right? So if that's the agenda, tell me which millennial wouldn't buy into that? Every last one.
That's right.
Because it makes sense. In fact, we're moving toward a Star Trek world, but we're not, of course, because the agenda is driven by the billionaires and the CEOs and the presidents and the people in power. Do you think for 1 second that they would give up any of their wealth? Seriously? Do you really seriously think that these people that have accumulated generational wealth, right? They've been rich for
Jeff Bezos
generations.
is going to start using public transport again.
Some might.
He'll go shopping at Aldi.
There you go. That's what's going to happen. Yeah, I can see that. No. This is for us. This is not for them.
That's right.
And this is something that the author said just in the paragraph before that. Okay, let me just share it with you again.
Blatantly obvious when you see who's going to be affected by this.
Yeah. The plan to reform the way we do things is real. It's true that leaders around the world are enthusiastically repeating the notion. And it's true that such reforms would constitute a significant intervention in the lives of citizens to realize the vision of a group that can, without hyperbole, without exaggeration, be best be termed as the global elite.
That's right.
Problem, reaction, solution.
That's
Problem, reaction, solution. I know this is, look, I like David Icke a lot. Problem, reaction, solution. That's what we're given here, right? Let me just finish the article very quickly, and then I want to have a discussion with my esteemed colleague. Author David Goodhart has described 2 vantage points which are key to thinking about how differently a great reset might affect different groups. One is the anywheres, people whose livelihoods are portable. Another is the somewheres, people who depend on local economies and the strength and protection of the nation state. Okay? Now, you should know for yourselves which group you belong to. You might remember them from such recent phenomena as Brexit and Donald Trump's inward-looking determination to make America great again. The somewheres feel they've had a bad time at the hands of centralized super governments which pursue the priorities of the anywheres without considering the impact on those left behind. There's no doubt that a reset is needed. the last decade has seen societies polarize and accentuated conflict. There are environmental as well as social problems to confront, but the sudden rash of conspiracy theories, including that concerning the Great Reset, is an expression of anxiety by those who feel they will be left out. Building back better requires that they too be taken along. And she closes the way she started. I resist, you oppose, they are recalcitrant is not a declension we should be comfortable with. All right? Just think about that for a second, everybody. Now, these are two journalists, which are clearly not conspiracy theorists in any way, shape, or form, but they are pointing out all the component parts that make up a good conspiracy theory.
Mekhi, who is that person? Just read that next line.
Yeah, so Pamela Palm McGuinness is the managing director of strategy and policy at the strategic communication firm Agenda C. All right, and this article I shared with you appeared in the Sydney Morning Herald. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is in the mainstream now. This language, and
yes.
And I don't care how much they say, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I think conspiracy is a cookie. That's okay. You are now knee deep in it. You're in it just by having written what you've written, right? Because she said, well, the global elite is doing this, yeah, and
good luck with that.
And good luck with that, right? So Naomi Klein has been an activist, for the longest time, and like I said, she wrote a lot for the Guardian, which I read avidly. But yeah, it's astounding that two people that would be considered, be it left or right leaning, doesn't really matter, mainstream journalists or activists, right? That you just snare.
That's right.
The next one, which we probably don't have time to share with you, was written by Quinn Slobodian, and Quinn is a historian or associate professor of history at Wesley College at Massachusetts, and he's even more specific. And I just want to share one paragraph with you. Mm-hmm. Many of the world's tech companies and CEOs have done well from this crisis, and he's referring to the COVID-19 crisis. Indeed, in the same week that many Americans lost their jobs, Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, added $13 billion to his fortune in just one day. Mm-hmm. With surreal realities like these, where prominent members of the 1% really do appear to have gained from the pandemic, how much of a leap is it to persuade someone that the crisis has been orchestrated deliberately so that the elites can amass power? Again, mainstream historian, guys.
This is it. So, like the people that the prior story referred to as the anywheres and the somewheres, and that the anywheres feel like they're being left behind, or as the somewheres felt like they were being left behind. And labeling groups of people in such a way to have them more or less feel like they should be comfortable. I don't think she quite wrote it like this, but if I read between the lines, feel comfortable this is going to affect everyone except for the elite. Everyone's included in this big scoop. We're all getting scooped up in it. There's no stragglers. There isn't anything. Mekhi and I, in our generation, if we're lucky, Mekhi, we might get a 20-year lease or whatever it is, right? I struggle for the people between us and the elite who have worked and gotten somewhere and have, a string of rental properties. I don't feel for them financially, but I think that same dilemma that we don't want to give up the little things that we've got, how is that going to affect them? Because if they live off rental income and they're going to give up all their property and everything they own, what are they going to have left? Exactly. Does it matter? If this is the chasm between where we are now in our great society, the capitalism, and everything's based around I have to say, all the people all my friends who work, frontline work and do really hard, manual labor, and they're really happy actually. Yeah. It's because their life doesn't change. It doesn't matter which side of this that they are on, right? Ours, like Mekhi said, alluded to, that we've worked hard to get our little piece of the world. And then there's people that own tons of the world, and then there's the people above all of that. So I think these three pockets of ourselves that we know have our own personal dilemma in our little pocket. But overall, if this chasm from where we're at now to where we could be was a Star Trek universe where no one owned anything at all, and those people would be more, hierarchy. They designed themselves into roles, and the hierarchy was just to provide, right? If that's what they were, whatever, right? Would I cave to it? Probably. I don't think I'd get a pitchfork, right, and resist that way. But if they made our lives comfortable, Mekki, for 20 years, right, or 30 years, until we weren't around anymore, the new people coming through would just be living in the new world.
And this is really it, right? I mean, you hit the nail on the head, my friend. You have to outweigh the elderly. And the funny thing is this with this pandemic, and that's why I don't think this is
because it wipes out the elderly.
It wipes out the elderly. It wipes out the elderly.
The biggest stopping block.
Take a breath here, right? Because that's exactly what's happening. It disproportionately affects the infirm, the nursing home occupants, if you will. So this virus, this pandemic. I mean, a lot of people don't believe there's a pandemic. Now, take a step back, guys. Right? If you're among the group on listenership, it's okay. It's an okay opinion to have, but be aware that it might very well be real, and not only that, it might very well be a pandemic. Yeah, absolutely.
I like pandemic. Yes,
yeah. And I do believe that it is. That's my opinion, and not because I've been calling for it. Not calling for it. I've called it 10 years ago, but because it fits. It fits the agenda, it fits the narrative, it fits where we are right now from a historical point of view as well, and where we could have been. Like I said last week, there's this very important ceremony that's going to take place in Australia in a couple of weeks' time. And that ceremony, Dave, believe it or not, that is right in line with the awareness cascade. And if enough of us were of the right mindset, right, and maybe a certain number of people had to be there as well, and maybe the higher the number of people, maybe that's why the Fibonacci sequence spit out, the 7.76 billion. Then the better the chances to actually ascend, to leave this matrix behind, as it were. But I don't think we can get there. There's no way we're going to get there, in my mind, because the fear and the lockdowns. Because the thing is this: I mean, how do you negatively affect everybody on the planet that is maybe positive or has a good life? You lock them up. But you can't lock them all up.
No.
But you lock them. But we did. We locked up a huge chunk of the population
in their own homes.
In their own homes.
Yeah,
it's genius. Again,
it was the greatest example of civil obedience that we've ever seen.
It's astounding. And you know what? If you don't want to look, that's fine. You're going to die. You're going to get sick. You're going to have long-term problems. It's up. You don't go out. Don't wear a mask. Do what you like. Look yourself out. It's your liberty. It's your freedom. It's your right not to do it. But then you'll have long COVID, or you'll die. It is if just think about the implementation, the planning, and we talked about the microbiologists that have been dying over the last 2 decades. All of that. You can trace it all back over the. I mean, you can actually trace it back probably 5,000-10,000 years if you really wanted to, and you had time. But even in the last few decades, it can all be traced back, and you can follow the steps. Now that the breadcrumbs have revealed the end game to some extent, it's actually it's like a lit path to where we are today.
Yeah. So looking, if we didn't realize that we were walking along the path with the breadcrumbs, and then finally we're at the gate that says Great Reset at the address, right? Yeah. And you look back and you realize all those steps it took you to get there were there, right? They all occurred in the right order. They were numbered. You got there. The direction was solid, right? If the WEF hadn't made this declaration to blow the dust off this plan, which I'm going to kind of repeat. I know we've only got 2 minutes, but I'll be really real quick. A plan that didn't have the word virus and it didn't have the climate change in it. It was just about a global change in the way we ran our lives. It didn't have the depth at which this was, except it did have living wage in it, about replacing payment to people if there's no companies that employ anyone anymore. How do we keep all these people alive? Hence, like the Agenda 21 plan and everything. And all of this is like an arrowhead, Mackie, to where we are right this second.
Look, but that's exactly right. Because I mean, what we are looking, the ultimate goal of capitalism is automation, no labor. Labor, being people, is the ultimate thorn on the side of the capitalist, right? Means of production are great, but if the means of production are people, that's no good. So if we can automate everything, machinery, software, whatever, I am in heaven. I've just right-sized my company. I don't need any employees. Beautiful. That is the ultimate dream of the capitalist, having no people in their business. None.
One of my friends, we made a company together, and he did a B2B operation back in where was it, like early 2000. Where he was selling directly to people with zero intervention. Zero. And that was the best thing he's ever done. Ever. And it was just a website, things arrive and they just disappear and he just gets profit. It's only profit. Doesn't care what people order, right? He's like a junior version of Bezos, but he's a really nice guy instead.
Yes, to be late.
It comes around too quick. Look, After Hours with Jer Bear is coming up. This is Dave and Meckie's Shiny Side Out, if you've just caught the end of it. Catch us next week, and in the meantime, watch every news outlet you can. Find out what's going on in the real world. See you guys.